Eating gold on food raises, or let's put it this way, it turns that food into a sacrament similar or equivalent to fasting beforehand. And the length of the fast makes the value of the food that you end up eating even more valuable than had you not fasted or fasted as long. Gold does something similar along the same lines. It makes the food into a sacrament. It elevates it to a whole nother level in which you're not just eating to satisfy your instinct. You're eating to raise your consciousness to as high a level as is possible in this lifetime. And of course, that goal is cosmic mind. Not that we should have omniscience like God, but that we should have at least a taste of it, a little bit. It's like a little child playing with toys fashioned in the image of the father's work, or the mother's, for that matter, in which the child is presuming to do what daddy or mommy is doing, not so much to take some of the burden of the workload off the parent, but to empathize, because the parent is serving as a role model. And isn't that what we want God to be for us, a role model? But what does that mean? Most people think, it means you're supposed to behave a certain way. No, it doesn't mean that at all. You might even be a thief, as perceived by society. It has nothing to do with behavior. We've got totally the wrong focus. It has to do with not so much what we do, but what we empathize with. What do we identify with? See, this is what meditators normally call identification. What do we identify with? But empathy is actually a parallel term. It's an equivalent term to identification. So do you empathize? What do you empathize with? What do you identify with? Well, cosmic mind, it would be nice. But just because you identify with something doesn't mean you're duplicating or replicating that to the same degree or in the same manner. Because we don't have the nervous system of the Almighty to be an equivalent replication of the Almighty, right? But in our own small little way, we can to our limited degree. So that's what I mean by a taste. It depends whose reference you're using. From God's point of view, yeah, it's a taste. But from our point of view, it's like, whoa, it's as much as I can handle. Because we're taking ourselves to the limit of appreciation. Now, you can put your attention on whatever you want to. And during the practice of yoga, in meditation, we're putting our attention on that essence of God, not on God itself, but on the essence of God. Because we don't expect to be God, because we don't have the nervous system for it, but we want the suffusion of that essence in ourself, 24/7, automatically, spontaneously, without thinking about it. So if God had a limited nervous system, namely our body, how would God act, think, and speak, and be limited thereby? See? So we're not trying to be God. It's the other way around. If God managed to express itself in a very limited way through our nervous system, by being in our nervous system, and living our life for us on our behalf inside this body and this mind and this personality and this ego, how would it be? How would it be? Before everything else, before consideration of behavior, how would it be? Yeah, that's a significant shift of focus. Because the behavior doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. The behavior is irrelevant. How would God be in us? How would it be? So fasting normally is an attempt to increase receptivity. And I'm in no position to fast anymore. I've done all my fasting. In fact, I'm grumpy. I don't want to fast. It's the last thing I want to do. Instead, I'm looking for ways to partake of the foods that I normally can't eat because I get sick if I eat them. Why is that? Because I identify with the people around me. And I was born into a family, and now I'm programmed with memory, and I'm stuck in the memory of the resentment, the regret, and the resentment of being born into a family of thieves and liars. And so I've taken it upon myself to expect that life is horrible and miserable. I expect it to be the case. I don't expect it to be enjoyable. And that's shortchanged me every time I had the opportunity to break free, so to speak, from the limitations of family. I never did. I just keep staying within the little rat hole that I was born into. And I attempted to by fasting and whatnot, and I got a little bit, but I never reprieved, but I never did anything with it. I just slid. It took a while, but I just slid right back to the rat hole. So obviously sacrifice isn't working for me. All it's done is weaken my resolve of motivation to be better than what I was given at birth. So gold is a different approach. Not to make a sacrifice so much as to bring in something new, the third element. See, Maharishi always talked about this. You don't dwell on the problems. You just bring in what's missing. You bring in more light. You bring in more consciousness. And then you shine it on the problems, and they don't look the same anymore as they once did. Might change behavior, but most significantly, it changes perception of the situation, so you don't see it the same way anymore. You see it differently. So if I get sick eating animal foods, is it because I see them the wrong way? Because the animals I was surrounded by, the human animals, acted like shit and made me feel like shit because I thought I'm them, but I'm not. But I identified with them. I empathized with them, and I'm stuck on that. So the whole point of gold is to unstick and get stuck to something else. Gold is very sticky. And I don't know why it creates such greed in people's minds. It might be because the purpose of their life is not to serve others, but to serve themselves. And so the gold accentuates that. And so gold is really not for anybody who's into themselves. Unless the time and attention to being, dwelling on oneself is the time allotted that, so that you can be more for other people. So you don't just, get so spent that you can't be there for others. I mean, isn't that what food is, It's very self-serving. You're eating all for yourself. But, okay, now that you got the food in your belly, what do you do with that energy or whatever, motivation, whatever it is that food is providing you? What do you do with it? And that's when it comes the opportunity to serve others. So what gold does, is it substitutes for fasting to help us appreciate what we're getting out of food, that self-service. But how we make use of that self-service matters a lot. It matters a lot as to the outcome. Because the extent of what gold represents is nothing less than cosmic mind. That's what gold is. Not just a metaphor, it's an embodiment in the material world of cosmic mind, which is absolute. It's non-changing. It's omniscience taken to infinity. And not just omniscience on one subject, but from God's point of view, omniscience on all subjects simultaneously. That's the difference between God's nervous system and the human nervous system. We're in the likeness of God, but we're not equivalent to God. In the likeness is not the same thing as being equivalent to. We can only be omniscient on one subject at one time, and there are infinitely many subjects. So it's infinity of infinity is what it amounts to when it comes to God's awareness versus ours. So we can't even hope to have God's awareness. That would be this human nervous system is incapable of that. We'd have to vibrate outside the human nervous system in order to do that, which means we'd have to be in unity consciousness before we even consider developing any further beyond what can register in human consciousness. But at least it's good. So it's good to know our limits, and it's good to know what the purpose of gold is for when it comes to what role it can have in a human life. It's not just something to look at and adore. It's something to become. That's what we do when we eat. We want to identify with the food to such a degree that we become the food. And that's what digestion is geared for. Breaking the food down, absorbing it, eliminating anything the body doesn't want anymore. It's all to facilitate empathy or identification with food at the chemical level, at the cellular level of every cell of our body. Sure, you could achieve that with meditation, but you'd have to be terribly enlightened to be able to do it. And most of us are not, and so eating facilitates something we can't do mentally, so we do it physically. And everything in the physical world has its equivalent of what it represents in the non-physical world, and that's what gold represents. It represents cosmic mind. And then the question posed is not, well, how much do you identify with cosmic mind? So much, the limiting factor is not how much do we identify with cosmic mind, it's how much do we make use of it? And then the next question is, well, why aren't you making use of it? Because the last time you made use of it, all you did was think about yourself. So you lost your use of it. So you see, these questions have consequential questions, and we have to keep asking, what is the consequential question? Okay, and then answer that one, and then go on to the next one until we finally find out why we're such shitheads living in a shitty world. It's because we didn't do anything useful for others. We didn't magnify our karma to include others. We did not amplify our karma by including others. And so our karma was limited to ourself, and that's all we did. We developed ourself. But we did not develop the universe. And in not contributing to the development of the universe, we did not gain universal status. You gain what you dwell on. You gain what you work on developing. And so it's not a question of gold or money being corrupting or evil. It's a question of what do you do with it? You know, what do you do with it? Did you do anything useful with it besides just dwelling on yourself? See, now this is a path of yoga that has been the only path of the householder up until, you know, all these yogis started coming out of India giving us meditation practices, not the least of which was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. But the only yoga the householder had up to that point, back in, what was it, 50-something, 1950-something, 55 or whatever, when Maharishi started to move around India before he came to the West, all we had was action, karma yoga, action, as the means of developing our consciousness. It won't give us enlightenment per se. I mean, I suppose it could, because I don't know if it can. King Janaka of India was a householder, he was a king, and he was enlightened. So how did he achieve it? Did he do something else in addition to being a king? I don't know. But his identification was totally with cosmic mind, not with the materialism of being a wealthy, powerful individual. Yet, it can, at the very least, this I know from experience, it can, at the very least, take you to the brink of cosmic consciousness without actually taking you all the way. And that might be the value of a householder's existence is, how many people are you responsible for? And how well did you do your job? Because if you're responsible for a whole nation, and you did a pretty good job, then that really helps bring you to the brink, but it doesn't take you all the way. For that, you have to stop being king and caring what you're doing for somebody else. And, oh no, I still got to fix this. I got to help people. That'll always hold you back. So it can't take you all the way. That's right. It can't. Because at some point you have to stop being a king and let the momentum of what you did that brought you to this point take you the rest of the way. But you have to stop being king anymore and let the reverberation or the reaction take you the rest of the way. So you stop doing the action, new action, and you let the reaction take you the rest of the way. And that's tough, because when you have a habit pattern, an addiction for helping other people, you can't overlook yourself. And I guess in my attempt to be a nudist from the age of 14 till now, although I haven't been recently, it's been this idea of being more selfish. And that's not popular, to be selfish, to brag about being selfish. By way of being an exhibitionist, it's not very popular, because people don't do much for other people in the first place. So they don't have any wiggle room in which to ease up the slack a bit and focus on themselves for a change. Now, the people who brought nudism back and revived it from the dead when it died its death of the ancient Greeks were the Nazis, or the pre-World War II Germans. And they called it body culture, I believe. And it was only the men. It was strictly a male phenomenon. And it was a subset of the youth corps who would, do exercise